Today I nominated him for, I guess, if you like health and if you like people that live a long time, it's the most important position, RFK Jr. Bobby. And I just looked at the news reports. People like you, Bobby. Don't get too popular, Bobby.
Donald Trump has announced many of his choices for key government positions since becoming president-elect. A number of them, more than one, have raised eyebrows in Washington and indeed around the world. And that's where we will start on our American Roundtable this week. With us today, Melody Barnes, Executive Director of the Karsh Institute of Democracy, former Director of Domestic Policy under President Obama, and Tim Naftali, a presidential historian. Good to see both of you. Tim, and I know you're taking some time out of a family trip to speak with us, so my added thanks to you. And I'm glad it's both of you this week because I'm trying to make sense of all of this in my head and sort out whether we should be concerned, because certainly there are concerns about some of these cabinet appointments. Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, RFK Jr., who Trump mentioned there, in charge of health, Pete Hegseth for defense. Those are sort of the main points of concern, I should say. Melody, what does that tell you about Donald Trump's priorities and how he's approaching this second term?
Sure. Well, first, as always, it's great to be with you. I think it tells me three things. Okay. One, that he's very serious about his agenda and about moving it very quickly. What he said on the campaign trail, he intends to do. Secondly, that he values loyalty quite a bit. And I think one of the things that he learned from his first time in office was that there are people who were focused on the institutions and focused on the law, and that were slowing him down. Mm-hmm. And that this time around, he wants to put people in who are aligned with him and won't be speed bumps along the way to achieving what he wants to achieve. Right. And the third thing is that he is also very serious about what some people would call change, others would call disruption, and others in turn would call breaking institutions. That he wants to clear the swamp, all the language that we've heard before, and that he intends to bring in people who share his point of view on that.
Yeah, Tim, I mean, it's hard not to see, particularly the Gaetz nomination for Attorney General, whether it gets confirmed or not. It's hard not to see that as Donald Trump trying to destroy the Justice Department and get retribution, given what has happened to him. Have you ever seen anything like this in terms of the potential impact it will have on American institutions?
Well, first of all, I think that it's great to be here, and I agree with all 3 points that Melody made. I think this reflects, first of all, there are elements of this that are unique, and there are elements that are not. When Ronald Reagan was elected, his first cabinet included people who were adversaries of the very institutions they were selected to run. So James Watt, who headed the Interior Department, and Ann Gorsuch, actually the mother of Justice Neil Gorsuch, who was at the Environmental Protection Agency, was no fan of environmental protection. So the very fact that you choose somebody for a department that you don't believe in is not something new. What is new are 2 different things. One is that this is happening almost across the board. And secondly, Donald Trump ignored the primaries. He ran in the primaries, but he didn't participate in any debates. He didn't have to make any deals. Ordinarily, a president's cabinet reflects deals that they made on their way up to power. The only person in this cabinet right now, or nominated to this cabinet, who represents a deal is RFK Jr. Everybody else comes out of Trump world. And so it doesn't represent the broad swath of the Republican Party. It doesn't represent deals with allies in Washington. Does this mean, of course, that he will encounter those speed bumps in the confirmation process that he's trying to avoid in the policy process? I suspect we'll be discussing that in a moment.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that. That's why we have you here, for that contextual history piece there, because I didn't know that about Reagan. So let's talk about that what Tim raised there, Melody. That's the recess appointments, the idea that to get his choices confirmed, that it would happen while to fast track it without Senate confirmation. What do you make of that option being used? Because it is possible, but I don't know what we should make of it, I guess.
Sure. So recess appointments are in the Constitution, and other presidents have used them. Bush, 43, appointed like 171, Clinton about 139, Obama about 32 recess appointments.
Okay.
But what's interesting and important here is also that in the Constitution is the Senate's advice and consent responsibility. And what President-elect Trump has indicated is that he wants to bypass that to get his appointees confirmed as quickly as possible. Again, moving past the speed bump. And what this calls to question is the relationship that he intends to have with the other institutions that are intended to be a check on executive power, that the vast majority of the American people, regardless of political parties, say is absolutely important, and for the appropriate vetting that needs to take place as part of the Senate confirmation process.
So, Tim, how much of this is about that, trying to either test loyalty or, again, upend some of the very structures that are in place to have a check and balance system on the power of the president?
Well, I think that in Donald Trump's mind, to the extent one can be in his mind, those two issues are fused. I don't think he separates them out. For him, policy is loyalty and loyalty is policy. I would say that he is disappointed when Donald Trump is disappointed with the choice that the senators have made as their leader. He wanted Rick Scott of Florida, a very Trumpy senator, if I can put it that way. And instead, he got as traditional a Republican as you'll find these days at the high level of leadership, John Thune. Was very close to Mitch McConnell, and that would not make the president-elect Donald Trump very happy. So he is pleased to be testing Republicans. What I think people ought to keep in mind is that presidents almost always get their choice. Presidents get their cabinets approved. Mm-hmm. There are examples of them not, but the most famous example took place in the George Herbert Walker Bush years when his Secretary of Defense, John Tower, was turned down for ethical issues and also because he seemed to have a drinking problem. Mm. But the Senate was a Democratic Senate, and only one Republican voted against Tower. It would be very hard for Donald Trump not to get his appointments. Now, Matt Gaetz is going to test that precedent really hard, and we'll see what happens. Hard to predict. But for the most part, one should expect every single one of his nominees to get confirmed.
Really? You think so? Melody, do you agree? Do you think that they're all going to get passed?
I think the vast majority will, and I certainly wouldn't bet a lot of money that they all will not be confirmed. However, what happens on the way to a confirmation process is a back and forth between the White House and the Senate and between the Congress. And we've got members of Congress who are expressing concerns about many of the nominees, Rosemary, that you identified. Yeah. And what I saw when I was a Senate staffer is that before a confirmation process, sometimes a senator or senators would tell the White House, this dog won't hunt. This nominee doesn't have the votes. This nominee will be causing credibility problems, and the nominee will withdraw, or the White House will withdraw the nominee. What I think President Trump is signaling is that he wants to ignore that and use the recess and appointment process, which would require the Senate and the House to engage with one another to create that recess so that he can appoint these individuals and probably test, as you have indicated, that back and forth between those two institutions.
I only have 30 seconds. Tim Naftali, just answer me this. Have you ever seen a president-elect or president connect with the world's richest man in this way before? Is there a president that has used a very rich person in the same way that Donald Trump is using Elon Musk?
No, the closest comparison was John F. Kennedy and his father, and his father was one of the richest people in the Western Hemisphere. But they were related. That was a very different kind of relationship. But no, the Elon Musk story, his role in this transition in the election is unique.
Okay, we'll come back and we'll do a whole other panel on Elon Musk. I was so glad to have both of you on this because you were both exactly who I needed to hear from this week. Thank you both so much. Have a good weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You as well.